A first ultrasound is supposed to be a moment of pure magic, the first glimpse into a future you've lovingly built with your partner. For Crystal Armstrong, it was the day her world didn't just crack, it shattered into a million irreparable pieces. She walked into that sterile white room, expecting to see the flickering heartbeat of her baby. She did. But she also saw the woman who had been sharing her husband's bed, standing right beside him. What her husband Bruno didn't know was that Crystal's heart wasn't the only thing that was prepared. Tucked inside her designer handbag, past the prenatal vitamins and baby name books, lay a different kind of future, a set of freshly printed divorce papers. This isn't just a story of betrayal. It's the story of what happens when a woman's deepest love is met with the ultimate deception, and she decides to choose herself. The house on Silverwood Lane was Crystal's masterpiece. As an up-and-coming interior designer, she had poured her soul into its restoration. The two-story Georgian home was a symphony of cool greys, warm woods, and strategically placed art that spoke of a life curated with intention and taste. It was the backdrop for the perfect life she had built with her husband, Bruno Armstrong. To anyone looking in, the Armstrongs were the epitome of modern success. Bruno, a sharp and ambitious senior analyst at a prestigious investment firm, and Crystal, the creative talent whose work was beginning to grace the pages of architecture magazines. Their love story had been a whirlwind of city lights and shared dreams. They met at a charity gala, a cliché they both found amusing. He was captivated by her laugh. She was drawn to his unwavering focus. They were a power couple, their ambitions perfectly complementing each other. Marriage followed, and then after 2 years of careful planning, the news they'd been waiting for Crystal was pregnant. The first trimester had been a blur of morning sickness and secret joy. Now at 12 weeks, the nausea was finally subsiding, replaced by a blossoming energy and an ever-growing baby bump that Crystal would cradle possessively. The ultrasound, scheduled for a Tuesday afternoon, felt like the true beginning. It was the day their abstract joy would take form, a tiny, grainy image that would make everything real. Don't forget, 2 p.m. at the Northwood Clinic. Crystal had reminded Bruno that morning, her voice bright with excitement. She'd laid out his favorite blue shirt, the one that made his eyes look like the summer sky. Wouldn't miss it for the world. Ames, he'd said, kissing her forehead before rushing out the door. Biggest deal of my life. But for the past few months, Crystal had been nursing a quiet, ugly feeling, a tiny splinter of doubt that had lodged itself deep in her heart. It started subtly. Bruno was working later, his texts becoming shorter, more perfunctory. The easy intimacy they once shared, the late-night talks and lazy Sunday mornings, had been replaced by a polite distance. He'd scroll through his phone for hours, a tight, unreadable expression on his face. When she'd ask what he was looking at, he'd just shrug. Work stuff. Market analysis. It'd bore you. Then came the scent, a faint, sweet perfume, floral and musky, that clung to his shirts when he came home late. It wasn't her Chanel No. 5. It was something younger, less complex. When she mentioned it, he'd laughed it off. Must be someone from the office. Brenda in accounting wears some pretty potent stuff. The splinter dug deeper. A credit card statement she'd opened by mistake revealed charges she couldn't place, dinners at expensive restaurants she'd never been to. A significant charge from a high-end jewelry store, La Perle Rose. When she confronted him, his explanation was smooth, almost too smooth. Oh, that was for the team, he'd explained, not quite meeting her eye. We landed the Henderson account. I took them out to celebrate. And the jewelry was a corporate gift for a client's wife. All standard practice aims. You know how it is. She wanted to believe him. Desperately. She told herself it was the pregnancy hormones, the anxiety of impending motherhood making her paranoid. Her best friend Chloe, a pragmatic and fiercely loyal lawyer, wasn't so sure. Paranoia is your gut telling you what your heart doesn't want to hear, Chloe had said over coffee, her brow furrowed with concern. Men like Bruno, successful, handsome, they live in a world of temptation. Just be careful, Crystal. Keep your eyes open. The final undeniable crack in her perfect portrait came 2 weeks before the ultrasound. Bruno was in the shower, and his phone left on the bedside table buzzed incessantly. A name flashed on the screen, Sophia. Not Sophia from marketing or Sophia, last name, just Sophia. A series of messages appeared on the lock screen. Sophia. Last night was amazing. Sophia. Can't stop thinking about you. Sophia. You really think we can make this work? You promised. Sophia. See you Tuesday 3. See you Tuesday, the day of their ultrasound. The air left Crystal's lungs. The room tilted the beautifully curated greys and whites of her bedroom, suddenly feeling cold and sterile like a hospital room. This wasn't paranoia. This was a betrayal so profound it felt like a physical blow. The splinter wasn't a splinter anymore. It was a gaping wound. For a full day, she was paralyzed by a grief so immense she could barely move. She sat in the nursery they had just started painting, a pale, serene yellow, and sobbed until her throat was raw. She looked at the crib they had assembled together, his laughter echoing in her memory, and felt a rage so pure it burned away the tears. But Crystal Armstrong was not one to crumble. Her father, a stern but loving man, had taught her that the greatest strength was found not in avoiding storms, but in learning how to navigate them. The grief hardened into a cold, diamond-sharp resolve. She would not be the weeping, hysterical wife. She would be the architect of her own survival. The next morning, she made 2 phone calls. The first was to Chloe, who listened in stunned silence before her voice turned to steel. Okay, we're going to handle this. No hysterics. Strategy. What do you want to do? I want to be prepared, Crystal said, her voice devoid of emotion. I want everything in order. I want to know exactly what I'm dealing with. The second call was to a man whose number Chloe gave her, a private investigator named David Harrison, a discreet and highly effective professional who specialized in marital asset verification. For the next 2 weeks, while Bruno continued his charade of the devoted husband-to-be, Crystal lived a double life. She smiled. She discussed baby names. She rubbed her belly and talked about their future. All the while, her email inbox was filling with reports from Mr. Harrison. The reports were devastatingly thorough. Photographs of Bruno and Sophia, a stunningly beautiful dark-haired woman in her mid-20s, leaving a restaurant holding hands. Pictures of them entering a boutique hotel in the city. A copy of the receipt from La Perle Rose, a delicate gold necklace with an S pendant. Mr. Harrison even discovered Sophia's full name, Sophia Miller, a recent graduate who had been an intern at Bruno's firm. He had apparently promised her the world, feeding her a story about a loveless, dying marriage and a wife who didn't understand him. Each email was a fresh stab of pain, but it also fueled Crystal's resolve. She wasn't just a victim. She was a woman gathering evidence. She forwarded everything to Chloe, who began drafting the legal documents. They were meticulously prepared, citing infidelity and requesting the immediate dissolution of the marriage. The petition was aggressive, leveraging Crystal's knowledge of their shared assets and demanding full ownership of the house on Silverwood Lane, which she had paid the down payment for with her own inheritance. On the Monday before the ultrasound, the final documents were ready. Chloe had them couriered to Crystal's house. She hid the large manila envelope in the bottom of her oversized Celine handbag, beneath the baby books and prenatal vitamins. It felt impossibly heavy, like it contained the weight of her entire shattered future. She was ready. Bruno was planning to bring his two worlds together on Tuesday. He just didn't realize that Crystal was about to bring a third, the unvarnished, brutal truth. The air in the Northwood Women's Clinic was thick with a unique blend of hope and anxiety. Soft pastel walls were adorned with framed photos of smiling newborns. Couples sat close together, the men looking slightly overwhelmed, the women radiating a nervous glow. Crystal sat beside Bruno, a placid smile fixed on her face. Inside her heart, hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of dread and adrenaline. Excited Bruno whispered, squeezing her hand. His touch felt alien, a violation. She had to fight the urge to snatch her hand away. Beyond words, she replied, her voice a perfect imitation of a happy, expectant mother. She had rehearsed this. She had steeled herself for this performance. It was the last role she would ever play as his wife. He looked at her, his expression a mask of loving concern. "You seem a little quiet today. Everything okay?" "Just tired," she said, offering a small dismissive wave of her hand. "And a little nervous, I guess. It's all so real now. It's going to be perfect, Ames. You, me, and our little nugget," he said, patting her belly. The hypocrisy was so staggering, it almost made her laugh. She looked at this man, her husband, the father of her child, and saw a complete stranger. The man she loved was an illusion. The man sitting next to her was a liar and a cheat, a performer worthy of an Oscar. Crystal Armstrong, a friendly nurse, called out. Bruno stood up, beaming. "That's us." He helped Crystal to her feet, his hand on the small of her back. The gesture, once a source of comfort, now felt like a brand. They followed the nurse down a hallway to a small, dimly lit room. There was a large reclining chair, a screen, and the ultrasound machine, a complex array of buttons and dials. "Just hop up on the chair, Crystal. The doctor will be with you in just a moment. Lift your shirt just above your belly." As Crystal settled into the chair, pulling up her soft cashmere sweater, Bruno's phone buzzed. He pulled it out, his thumb flying across the screen. "Damn it," he muttered, his brow furrowing. "Sorry, Ames. It's work. A client is having a meltdown. I need to make a quick call. I'll be right back. I promise." He leaned down to kiss her, but she turned her head slightly so his lips landed on her cheek. "Hurry back," she said, her voice flat. "You don't want to miss it, not for the world." He repeated his mantra of lies. He slipped out of the room, and Crystal was left alone in the quiet. The nurse had left a bottle of gel on the machine, and Crystal stared at it. In a few moments, that cold gel would be the conduit to the first image of her child, a child who would now be born into a broken home. A single hot tear escaped and traced a path down her temple. She wiped it away angrily. "Not now. Stay strong." Minutes stretched into an eternity. The sonographer, a kind-faced woman named Maria, came in and introduced herself. "Where's Dad?" she asked with a smile. He had to take a quick work call. He'll be right back, Crystal said, the lie tasting like ash in her mouth. Just as Maria was about to start, the door opened. Bruno walked in a sheepish grin on his face. Sorry about that. Everything's handled. But he wasn't alone. Standing just behind him, hesitating in the doorway, was Sophia Miller. She was even more beautiful in person. Long, dark, glossy hair fell over the shoulders of an expensive-looking trench coat. She was younger than Crystal probably by a decade, and had the flawless skin and wide-eyed look of someone who had never known true hardship. She clutched a designer bag, and around her neck, gleaming against her collarbone, was the delicate gold necklace with the S pendant. She looked nervous, her eyes darting from Bruno to Crystal and back again. Time seemed to slow down. The hum of the ultrasound machine, the soft lighting, the photos of happy babies on the wall. It all faded into a distorted, surreal backdrop for this nightmare. Crystal's gaze locked on Bruno. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just stared, her expression a blank canvas of disbelief and contempt. Bruno, a deer in the headlights, began to stammer. Ames, this is Sophia, a colleague from work. She was just in the area, and I mentioned where I was going, and she wanted to offer her support. You know, as a friend. A friend. The word was so absurd, so insulting it was almost comical. The sonographer, Maria, looked between the three of them, her professional smile frozen on her face. The air in the small room was now so thick with tension it was barely breathable. She cleared her throat. Shall we get started? Sophia gave a tiny, awkward wave. It's so nice to finally meet you, Crystal. Bruno talks about you all the time. Crystal's eyes, cold as ice chips, flickered to Sophia. She didn't acknowledge her. She simply turned her gaze back to the sonographer. Yes, please. Let's get started. Bruno, seemingly taking this as a sign of acceptance, guided Sophia further into the room. They stood together, a united front, near the head of the chair. He had brought his mistress to their baby's first ultrasound. The sheer, unmitigated audacity of it was breathtaking. Maria squirted the cold gel onto Crystal's stomach. Crystal flinched, but her eyes remained fixed on the monitor. The sonographer began moving the transducer across her skin. A grayscale, swirling image appeared on the screen. And then there it was, a tiny flickering pulse in the center of a small bean-shaped form. Thump, 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 thump. The sound filled the room, the strong, steady, rhythmic beat of her baby's heart. It was the most beautiful sound Crystal had ever heard, and it was happening in the middle of the ugliest moment of her life. There's your baby, Maria said softly, her voice a gentle anchor in the storm. Heartbeat is strong, 165 beats per minute. Everything looks perfect. Tears welled in Crystal's eyes, but this time they were not for her broken heart. They were for the tiny life on the screen, a life that was hers, and hers alone. In that moment, watching that valiant little heart beat against all odds, Crystal knew she would do anything to protect it. Bruno, oblivious to the storm raging within his wife, was captivated. Wow. He breathed, his hand reaching out to touch Crystal's shoulder. Look at that, Ames. That's our baby. Crystal shrugged his hand off as if it were a spider. After a few more minutes of measurements and images, Maria smiled. All right, everything looks wonderful. I'll just go print some pictures for you. I'll give you 3 a moment." The door clicked shut, leaving them in a suffocating silence, broken only by the hum of the machine. Bruno finally seemed to register the Arctic chill emanating from his wife. "Ames, are you okay? You haven't said a word." Crystal slowly, deliberately sat up. She wiped the gel from her stomach with the paper towel Maria had left. Her movements were calm, methodical. She reached for her large Celine handbag. Bruno watched her, a flicker of unease finally entering his eyes. Sophia stood awkwardly by the door, looking like she wanted to be anywhere else in the world. Crystal's hand bypassed the vitamins and the baby books. Her fingers found the stiff edges of the manila envelope. She pulled it out and placed it on her lap. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was quiet, but it cut through the room like a shard of glass. "I'm glad you're both here," she said, her eyes locking onto Bruno's. "It makes this much more efficient." She opened the clasp of the envelope and slid out a thick sheaf of papers. She held them out to him. "What's this?" he asked, his voice laced with confusion. "This," Crystal said, her gaze unwavering, "is a petition for the dissolution of our marriage." Bruno stared at the papers as if they were a venomous snake. His face went pale. "What, Crystal? What are you talking about? Is this a joke? Read the room." "Bruno," she said, her voice dripping with scorn. "Does it look like I'm joking?" She then flickered her gaze to Sophia, who had gone ashen. "And you, Sophia, you might want to see what you've won." Page 7. Details his financial commitments, or lack thereof. Page 9 includes photographs. "You're quite photogenic." Sophia's jaw dropped. Her eyes darted from the papers to Bruno, a look of dawning horror on her face. Crystal stood up, her movements graceful and steady. She took one of the freshly printed ultrasound photos from the tray where Maria had left them. She looked at the image of her child, her future. Then she looked at the man she had once loved, his face a mask of shock and disbelief. She placed the divorce papers on the now empty reclining chair. On top of the papers, she placed the other 2 ultrasound photos. "You can keep those," she said, her voice chillingly calm. "A little souvenir from the day you destroyed our family." Without another glance at either of them, Crystal Armstrong, holding the one precious image of her baby, turned and walked out of the room, leaving the wreckage of her marriage behind her. The sound of her baby's heartbeat was still echoing in her ears. It was the only one that mattered now. The drive from the clinic back to Silverwood Lane was a blur. Crystal didn't cry. The time for tears was over, replaced by a hold, clarifying rage. Her hands were steady on the leather steering wheel of her Range Rover, her knuckles white. She drove past familiar parks and storefronts, landmarks of a life that no longer existed. It was all just scenery, now the backdrop to her emancipation. The moment she pulled into her driveway, she reached for her phone. She didn't call her mother or her father. She called Chloe. "It's done," Crystal said, her voice clipped. "What happened? Are you okay?" Chloe's voice was a shot of pure, unadulterated support. He brought her. He brought the Mistress to the ultrasound, Chloe. Crystal said the words out loud for the first time, and the sheer insanity of it washed over her. He stood there next to her and watched our baby's heartbeat on the screen. There was a moment of stunned silence on the other end of the line, followed by a string of curses that would have made a sailor blush. That absolute, "I have no words. Where are you now? I'm home." I gave him the papers and walked out. "Good," Chloe said, her voice shifting back into lawyer mode. Okay, listen to me. He's going to panic. Then he's going to get angry. He's going to call text show up. You do not engage. Do you hear me, Crystal? Do not let him in. Do not talk to him. All communication goes through me. I'm sending a text to his lawyer right now, assuming he's contacted one, notifying him of this. Did you call the locksmith on my way home? He's meeting me there in 20 minutes, Crystal confirmed. It was a detail they had prearranged. Perfect. I'm leaving the office now. I'll be there in 30. Pack a bag. Essentials for you for a few days. We're going to my place. We don't want you there alone when he shows up. I'm not leaving my home. Chloe, this is my house. I'm not letting him drive me out of it. Crystal's voice was firm. This house was her sanctuary, her creation. She would not surrender it. Chloe paused. Okay. I understand. Then I'm staying with you. Lock the doors. Put the security chain on. Don't open it for anyone but me. I'm on my way. As if on cue, Crystal's phone began to buzz violently. Bruno, incoming call. She silenced it. A second later, a text message. Bruno, Crystal, pick up the phone. We need to talk about this. Bruno, what the hell was that? You can't be serious. Bruno, you're embarrassing me. You're embarrassing us. Bruno Ames, please. I love you. This is a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? The lie was so pathetic, so transparent. She dropped the phone into her purse as if it were contaminated. The locksmith, a burly man named Gus, arrived on time. He worked quickly and efficiently, his presence a calming, professional balm. As he replaced the deadbolt on the grand front door, Crystal walked through the house. She saw it now, with new eyes. The framed photo of their wedding day on the mantelpiece seemed to mock her. She took it down her fingers, leaving no print on the cool glass, and placed it face down on a table. The life it depicted was a fraud. Chloe arrived just as Gus was finishing up carrying 2 large bags of groceries and a bottle of expensive champagne. Rule 1 of broken hearts, she announced, setting the bags on the marble island in the kitchen. Never go through it on an empty stomach. Rule 2, always have bubbly for when you're done crying and ready to start fighting. Crystal finally let out a small, shaky laugh. I think I skipped the crying part and went straight to the fight. That's my girl, Chloe said, enveloping her in a fierce hug. They were standing in the kitchen when the headlights swept across the windows. Bruno's BMW X5 pulled into the driveway, tires crunching on the gravel far too fast. Showtime, Chloe muttered, taking a protective step closer to Crystal. A moment later, the sound of a key scraping uselessly in the new lock. Then a frantic, angry banging on the door. Crystal. Open. This damn door. What did you do to the locks? His voice was muffled but laced with fury. Crystal stood frozen in the center of her home, her arms wrapped around her pregnant belly. Chloe put a hand on her shoulder. You don't have to do anything. Let him burn himself out. Crystal. I'm not kidding. Let me in. We are married. This is my house, too. The injustice of his words, my house, ignited a fire in her. She walked to the front door, Chloe following closely behind. She didn't open it, but she spoke through the thick oak, her voice loud and clear. No, Bruno. This is my house. The down payment came from my inheritance, a fact that is clearly stated in the documents I gave you. You need to leave the property. There was a stunned silence from the other side. He clearly hadn't expected her to respond with such legal precision. "This is insane," he finally bellowed. "You're pregnant. You're emotional. You're not thinking clearly. You can't just throw me out over a little mistake. A little mistake." He had brought his affair to the genesis of their child's life and was calling it a little mistake. "You need to leave, Bruno." Crystal repeated, her voice colder than before. "Any further communication will be through our lawyers. If you don't leave, I will call the police." "You wouldn't?" He scoffed, but there was a new note of uncertainty in his voice. "Try me," she said. They could hear him pacing on the porch, muttering to himself. His phone probably buzzed with a message from his own newly hired lawyer, confirming Chloe's instructions. After a few more tense moments, they heard him stomp down the steps. The roar of his car's engine was angry and violent as he sped away down Silverwood Lane. The silence he left behind was profound. Crystal leaned her forehead against the cool wood of the door, her entire body trembling with the adrenaline crash. "You did it," Chloe said softly, rubbing her back. "That was the hardest part." Crystal shook her head. "No," she whispered, turning to face her friend, her eyes clear and resolute. "The hardest part is just beginning. But I'm ready." That night they drank the champagne not in celebration, but as a toast to resilience. They ate pasta straight from the pot and talked about the future. Not a future with a man in it, but a future with a baby, a career and a home that was truly and completely her own. As Crystal finally drifted off to sleep in her own bed, the sheets blessedly free of his scent, she didn't dream of Bruno. She dreamed of the color she would paint the nursery, now a bold, brilliant shade of sunrise orange, the color of a new day. The days that followed the confrontation at the clinic were a brutal education in the mechanics of divorce. The war wasn't fought with shouted words across a porch, but with coldly worded emails and exorbitant legal bills. Bruno, recovering from his initial shock, came out swinging. He hired one of the most ruthless divorce attorneys in the city, a man named Marcus Thorne, whose reputation for scorched earth tactics was legendary. The first volley was an attempt to paint Crystal as an unstable, emotionally erratic pregnant woman. Thorne's letters, CC'd to Chloe, were masterpieces of veiled insinuation. They referenced her hormonal state, her impulsive actions in changing the locks, and her unwillingness to engage in reasonable reconciliation. They demanded Bruno be allowed back into the home and proposed a joint custody arrangement that was laughable in its audacity. Chloe met every attack with a cool, surgical precision. "Standard playbook," she told Crystal, scanning a particularly nasty letter from Thorne. "He's trying to build a narrative. We'll counter with our own the story of a calculating, deceitful husband whose flagrant infidelity created an unsafe and emotionally damaging environment for his pregnant wife." The evidence from the private investigator became their shield and sword. The photos, the hotel receipts, the jewelry bill, Chloe compiled them into a damning portfolio that made Thorne's claims of a little mistake look utterly ridiculous. But the legal battle was only one front. The second, more insidious front opened with a phone call from a number Crystal didn't recognize. It was her mother-in-law, Eleanor Armstrong. Eleanor was a formidable woman, the matriarch of a family that valued appearances above all else. She was all old money and quiet judgment, her affection for Crystal always feeling conditional on how well she played the role of the perfect daughter-in-law. Crystal dear Eleanor's voice was smooth as silk, but with an undercurrent of steel. "I was so distressed to hear from Bruno. He's beside himself." "I'm sure he is," Crystal replied, her voice neutral. "Now I know things must be tense. But you're a sensible girl. You must understand that Men, well, men can be foolish. Bruno loves you. He loves this baby. A momentary lapse in judgment shouldn't be cause to detonate a family. A momentary lapse. It was the party line, the sanitized version of events they had all agreed upon. Eleanor Crystal said her patience wearing thin. This was not a momentary lapse. This was a calculated long-term affair. And he brought his mistress to my ultrasound. There is no coming back from that. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. He told me she was a work colleague offering support. Did he? Well, he lied. Just like he's been lying to me for months. And to you, apparently. Eleanor's tone shifted from condescending sympathy to icy disappointment. I think you are letting your emotions get the better of you. You have a duty to this child, to this family, to try and work through this. Tearing everything apart is the selfish choice, Crystal. Think of the scandal. Think of your child growing up in a broken home. That was the line. The selfish choice. My child will grow up in a broken home because its father broke it, Crystal retorted, her voice shaking with repressed anger. The most selfish thing I could do is raise my baby in a house built on lies and disrespect, to teach my child that this is what a marriage looks like. I will not do that. The conversation is over, Eleanor. She hung up the phone, her heart pounding. The call was a stark reminder of the world she was leaving behind, a world where a woman's pain was an inconvenience to be managed, and a man's betrayal was just a mess to be swept under the rug. Meanwhile, Sophia Miller, the catalyst for the entire implosion, was having her own crisis. Bruno's narrative to her had been one of imminent separation. He'd painted Crystal as cold, career-obsessed and emotionally distant. He'd promised Sophia that the baby was a final, desperate attempt by his wife to trap him, but that his heart was with her. He had promised her a future. The scene at the clinic, followed by panicked, evasive calls from Bruno, shattered that illusion. A week after the incident, a long, rambling email from Sophia landed in Crystal's spam folder. Subject: I am so sorry, Crystal. I know you have no reason to listen to me, and you probably hate me, and you have every right to. I just need to say that I was a fool. Bruno. He told me so many things. He said your marriage was over in all but name. He said you knew about it and didn't care. He made me believe I was saving him from a life of unhappiness. Seeing you that day, seeing the look on your face, I realized it was all a lie. I am so ashamed of my part in this. He used me, and he hurt you in a way I can't even imagine. I am ending things with him. I just wanted you to know that. I am so sorry. Crystal read the email twice. She felt a brief, fleeting flicker of something akin to pity for the young woman. Sophia was a pawn, another victim of Bruno's pathological selfishness. But pity was a luxury Crystal couldn't afford. She deleted the email without replying. Sophia Miller was a part of a life she was surgically removing. There was no need for further contact. Bruno, now fighting a war on two fronts and losing the support of his mistress, grew more desperate. His tactics shifted from manipulative to threatening. He tried to freeze their joint bank accounts, an act Chloe swiftly countered with an emergency court order. He sent Crystal long, rambling texts in the middle of the night, one moment, begging for forgiveness, the next accusing her of ruining his life. His masterstroke of cruelty came in the form of a legal petition from Thorne. He was officially contesting for primary custody of the unborn child, claiming that Crystal's vindictive and unstable behavior proved she would be an unfit mother. When Chloe told her, Crystal felt the ground drop out from beneath her. "He can't be serious," she whispered, her hand flying to her stomach. "He's desperate," Chloe said, her face grim. "He's trying to scare you, to bully you into a settlement that favors him. He has no grounds, Crystal. No judge in the world would look at this fact pattern and grant primary custody to a proven calculating adulterer. But we have to fight it, and it's going to be ugly." The thought of having to prove in a court of law that she was a fit mother to her own child was a violation almost as deep as the initial betrayal. Bruno wasn't just trying to leave her. He was trying to destroy her, to take the one thing that now gave her a reason to live. It was in that dark moment, staring down the barrel of a truly vicious custody battle, that Crystal realized the fight was no longer just about the house or the money. It was about her identity, her future, and her child. Bruno had underestimated her. He thought he had married a woman who curated beautiful spaces. He was about to find out he had married a woman who was willing to burn down the whole ugly structure to protect what was hers. And she had one more card to play, a piece of information from Mr. Harrison's final report that she and Chloe had been holding back, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The final report from David Harrison arrived not with a bang, but as a quiet, discreet email attachment on a rainy Thursday morning. Crystal sat at her kitchen island, a cup of herbal tea steaming untouched beside her, and read its contents on her laptop. The initial pages were a grim confirmation of what she already knew: more details about Sophia, more proof of the lies. It was painful but familiar territory. Then she reached the final section titled Financial Irregularities. As she read, the rhythmic drumming of the rain against the window panes seemed to fade into a dull hum. Ghost accounts, off-book investments, skimming, embezzlement. The words leaped off the screen, cold and clinical, yet they painted a picture of a man she didn't know at all. This wasn't just a man who had broken his vows. This was a criminal. The sheer scale of the deception, the calculated risk and greed, was breathtaking. A hot, potent wave of fury washed over her, so intense it made her dizzy. It was a primal urge for retribution. She imagined handing the report over to the authorities, watching the smug confidence on Bruno's face crumble under the weight of a public indictment. She envisioned his photograph on the news, the name Armstrong forever tarnished. The desire for vengeance was a sweet, dark poison in her veins. But then her hand moved instinctively to her belly, where a gentle flutter reminded her of the life growing within. Lily. What would a public scandal mean for her? A father in prison would be a lifelong shadow. The name Armstrong, a name she couldn't erase from her child's identity, would become a synonym for crime and disgrace. The child's support that would secure their future would evaporate in a maelstrom of legal fees and restitution payments. The fire of her rage cooled into something harder, colder, and far more dangerous: strategy. Revenge was an emotional indulgence, a fleeting satisfaction that would have permanent, messy consequences. What she needed, what her daughter needed, was a clean, decisive victory, a quiet amputation, not a bloody public execution. She forwarded the email to Chloe with a single line: "Call me, we need a new game plan." Chloe's response was immediate. "Crystal, this is a nuke. This is the ace of spades, the whole deck. We can end him." "I don't want to end him. Chloe." Crystal said, her voice steady, despite the tremor in her hands. "I want him to disappear. I want him erased from our lives so cleanly that all that's left is a signed check. We don't detonate this bomb publicly. We show it to him and let him know we have our finger on the button." A slow, appreciative smile spread across Chloe's face, visible even through the phone. "My God, Crystal, When you finally decide to fight, you fight to win. I like it. We hold this. We wait. He'll make a mistake, give us the perfect moment to play our hand. That perfect moment came a week later, delivered by a courier. It was a formal petition from Marcus Thorne's office. Bruno was officially contesting for primary custody. The document was a work of fiction, a vile narrative painting Crystal as a vindictive and unstable woman whose erratic behavior in the wake of their separation proved she was an unfit and unfit mother. It was a tactic designed to terrorize her into submission. Reading the words, Crystal felt a violation so profound it eclipsed the pain of the affair. He was trying to use her child, as a weapon against her. He was threatening the very core of her identity, the one pure and hopeful thing she had left. The fear was a cold knot in her stomach, but it was quickly consumed by a white-hot, clarifying anger. He had just handed them the justification they needed. He's crossed the line, Chloe, Crystal said, her voice dangerously calm. Set up the meeting. It's time to show him the bomb. The day of the settlement conference, Crystal stood before the full-length mirror in her bedroom. She chose her outfit with the precision of a general preparing for battle. Not a soft maternal dress, but a sharp black sheath dress by the row, its impeccable tailoring a kind of armor. Her hair was pulled back in a severe, elegant chignon. Her makeup was understated but flawless. She was 6 months pregnant now, her belly a proud, defiant curve that the dress accentuated rather than hid. She was not a victim. She was a mother protecting her territory. Walking into the gleaming impersonal conference room at Chloe's firm felt like stepping into an arena. Bruno and Marcus Thorne were already seated, a portrait of smug male confidence. Bruno looked tired, the strain of his double life now replaced by the strain of legal warfare. But he still wore an air of entitlement. He glanced at Crystal's belly for a fraction of a second before fixing his gaze on the polished table, a silent, cowardly refusal to meet her eyes. Thorne, however, offered a smile that was all teeth. Crystal, Chloe, thank you for coming. Thorne began, his voice a rich baritone of condescension. I'm glad to see you're ready to move past the emotion of the situation and be reasonable. We believe we have a proposal that is more than generous. Of course, it is contingent on the immediate withdrawal of this baseless and frankly inflammatory petition and a more equitable and realistic approach to the custody of the child. Chloe let the silence stretch after he finished, a deliberate, unnerving pause. She didn't respond to his points. Instead, she reached into her leather briefcase and pulled out a slim black folder. It looked innocuous, but Crystal knew it contained devastation. With a faint whisper of paper on wood, Chloe slid it across the vast mahogany table until it stopped directly in front of Thorne. Before we discuss your client's idea of generosity, Chloe said, her voice deceptively mild, perhaps you'd like to review our firm's most recent findings. Consider it supplemental information. Thorne's smile tightened. Annoyed by the deviation from his script, he picked up the folder with a sigh and flipped it open. The change was instantaneous and fascinating to watch. The smug confidence drained from his face as if a plug had been pulled. His shoulders, once squared and arrogant, slumped. His complexion turned a pasty, sickly grey as his eyes scanned the single-page summary. The account numbers, the estimated sum of the embezzlement, the name of the informant. He looked up from the paper, his professional mask shattered, and stared at Chloe with a look of pure shock. Then his gaze darted to Bruno. Bruno had been watching with detached curiosity, but seeing the look on his lawyer's face, his own expression shifted to one of confusion, then alarm. He leaned over to see the paper. Crystal watched as his face went through a rapid, brutal series of transformations, from confusion to dawning recognition, from recognition to sheer animal panic. He finally lifted his head and looked directly at Crystal. In his eyes, she saw no love, no remorse, only the raw, primal fear of a trapped animal. He knew. He was caught. Thorn, fumbling to regain his composure, cleared his throat. What is the meaning of this?" He stammered, his voice a weak imitation of its earlier strength, that Chloe said, leaning forward, her voice now hard as flint is our counteroffer. "It is not open for negotiation. My client, Crystal, will receive full unencumbered title to the house on Silverwood Lane. She will receive sole physical and legal custody of her child now and forever. A non-negotiable child support trust of 7 figures will be established and funded within 30 days. Your client will waive all future rights and claims to any and all marital assets. He will sign today." She let the terms sink in, then delivered the final crushing blow. In return for his immediate unqualified and total agreement to these terms, she continued, her gaze shifting to Bruno. "This folder, and the mountain of evidence it represents, will be permanently sealed. It will not be sent to your firm's board of directors. It will not be handed to the SEC. And it will most certainly not find its way to the New York District Attorney's office." She paused, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "But if you refuse, if you hesitate, or if you ever for the rest of your child's life attempt to challenge this custody agreement, we will burn you to the ground. Is that perfectly crystal clear?" The room was utterly silent, save for the faint hum of the air conditioning. Thorn was rendered mute, staring at the career-ending, life-destroying summary in his hands. Bruno had shrunk into his expensive suit. The arrogant financier was gone, replaced by a hollowed-out man, checkmated and utterly broken. He stared at his hands on the table, unable to speak. The hour they were given wasn't needed. Thorn advised his client in frantic whispers, and a new settlement agreement was drawn up on the spot. As Bruno picked up the pen to sign away his home, his marriage and his parental rights, his hand trembled so violently he could barely form his own name. He never looked at Crystal again. He signed the last page and walked out of the room, a ghost leaving the scene of his own haunting. 3 months later, after 22 hours of labor, Crystal gave birth to a beautiful, screaming 7-pound baby girl. She named her Lily. Holding her daughter for the first time, skin to skin, Crystal felt a wave of love so fierce and absolute it washed away the last vestiges of pain and anger. Every tear, every sleepless night, every hard choice had led to this perfect, sacred moment. It had all been worth it. The house on Silverwood Lane underwent a baptism. The somber greys and cool neutrals were replaced with warm creams, soft linens and vibrant splashes of color. The nursery was painted a brilliant, joyful sunrise orange. The master bedroom, once a site of betrayal, was now a serene sanctuary in shades of green and ivory. Piece by piece, she was erasing the past, building a new world on its foundations. One cool autumn evening, she sat in a rocking chair in the orange nursery, Lily sleeping peacefully against her chest. She looked out at the quiet street, the leaves on the trees turning gold and red. She had heard through Chloe that Bruno had been fired, the firm citing a loss of confidence. He had sold his car, liquidated his assets to fund the trust, and moved somewhere out west, disappearing from the life he had so spectacularly destroyed. Sophia was a footnote, a ghost from a story that no longer mattered. Crystal looked down at Lily's tiny, perfect face, her chest rising and falling in a steady, peaceful rhythm. The ultrasound photo, the one she had clutched like a talisman as she walked out of the clinic that day, was in a silver frame on the dresser. It was no longer a symbol of betrayal. It was a marker of her independence, the first artifact of her new life. She had walked into a storm and come out the other side not just intact, but stronger, fiercer, and more sure of herself than ever before. Her home was not just a collection of beautiful things, it was a fortress, and her heart, once broken, was now fully occupied by a love that was pure, unconditional, and entirely her own. Crystal's story is a powerful, gut-wrenching reminder that sometimes the deepest betrayals can lead to the most profound discoveries of our own strength. She walked into that clinic as a wife, expecting to share a moment of joy, and walked out as a warrior ready to build a new future for herself and her child. Her journey wasn't about revenge, it was about reclamation. She reclaimed her home, her peace of mind, and her power by refusing to be a victim of someone else's lies. What would you have done in Crystal's position? Have you ever faced a moment that forced you to dig deep and find a strength you never knew you had? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. We can all learn from each other's stories of resilience. If this story resonated with you and you believe in the power of a fresh start, please give this video a like and share it with someone who might need to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story of survival strength and the incredible power of the human spirit. Thank you for listening.